was able to provide the kind of air support needed in the face of North Korean aggression. During the opening weeks of combat, a mad scramble in Japan and the Philippines was able to produce an improvised squadron of F-51D Mustangs that could operate from the primitive airfields on the Korean peninsula. The Air Force was forced to recall 145 F-51Ds from stateside Air National Guard units to re-equip 2 of the 3 F-80 groups in order to provide battlefield close air support. The war was always seen by the United States as a proxy battle with the Soviet Union, the sponsor of North Korea. As a result, American leaders were constantly concerned that some action in Korea would lead to a nuclear war directly with the Soviet Union. Thus, U.S. forces were restricted in how they could operate in Korea. Most particularly, they were not to cross the Yalu River border with Communist China. The appearance of advanced MiG-15 jet fighters, secretly flown by experienced Red Air Force pilots, made operations by B-29s and F-80s over North Korea extremely dangerous. As a result, the 4th Fighter Wing, equipped with the new F-86 Sabre, was sent to Korea to counter the Soviet air threat. Much of what has been recorded as official history of the Air Force in the Korean War is little more than recycled wartime propaganda. In the past 65 years, Korea has become the forgotten war to most Americans, and as a result, few historians have challenged these facts. One of the main myths is that the pilots who arrived in Korea in December 1950 with their Sabres were combat-experienced veterans of World War II. In fact, it was the Sabre pilots who faced combat-experienced enemies during 1951, a year that U.S. pilots called the Year of the Honcho, during which the Americans played catch-up with their opponents. Captain Dick Becker, recognized as the 2nd Air Force MiG ace of the war, but the first whose victories were all confirmed by Soviet loss records, said of the fighting in 1951, "There was no 14-to-1 kill ratio when I was there. The guys we flew against were good, and they were as committed as we were. Every fight that I was in was decided by the guy in the cockpit who was better able to take advantage of the moments presented by luck. The MiG-15 was a dangerous opponent. We were very evenly matched, and I am certain that overall in that first year we fought them to a draw. In fact, when actual losses are tallied up, 1951 was a draw, with the Sabres and MiGs scoring 1-1. The MiGs were so good that in October 1951 they succeeded where the pilots of the Luftwaffe had failed in World War II. They inflicted such losses on the B-29s that the Air Force was forced to abandon daylight bombing missions and use the superfortresses only at night for the rest of the war. Even with the Sabres providing cover over MiG Alley to block the MiG-15s from getting at the fighter bombers over North Korea, the Russians, and later the Chinese, became such a threat that, by late 1952, fighter-bomber missions were not flown into MiG Alley until more Sabre-equipped fighter wings arrived as reinforcements in 1953, and even then the fighter-bombers were in seriously dangerous air north of the Chongchon River. Regardless of the validity or accuracy of Air Force claims of enemy aircraft shot down or of aircraft lost in combat, one thing stands clear. Despite being outnumbered by as much as 10-1 during 1951 and much of 1952, the Air Force was successful in maintaining air superiority over North Korea. No Red Air Force combat aircraft ever flew over the battlefield on the 38th parallel during 3 years of war. This is an accomplishment that is even more impressive when based on more realistic facts and figures than were given out at the time. Korea was a hard-fought war from the first day to the last. My friend Tom Cleaver has found first-person accounts of Sabre pilots, Thunderjet pilots, bomber crews, and pilots from both the Soviet and Chinese Air Forces to flesh out this balanced account of what really happened over MiG Alley. This account presents the story of what happened in Korea through the eyes of participants on both sides of the battle line, and is a significant contribution to understanding a war we as a nation have largely forgotten. Colonel Walter J. Boyne, United States Air Force, retired. Introduction.